wanted to talk about a topic that's actually been on my mind for quite a while. It's something I've been moving through, and I have an inkling that the collective can definitely utilize this information at this time. And it's around clearing karma or even clearing timelines as it relates to Egypt. So this message is specifically for people who feel a deep connection with Egypt, and I want to explore why that might be, why you might be feeling a deep connection to Egypt, whether it's through the culture, whether it's through the art, or you just always wanted to go there. I talk to a lot of people who might even say like, yeah, I know I've had a past life there, or like I've had people come to me and say like, I've seen you in a past life in Egypt, etc., etc. And I think for a lot of folks who identify as light workers or starseeds, then Egypt is a timeline or a moment in time that is probably showing up in your reality in some realm or dimension. And that could also be keeping you in certain karmic loops. So I want to talk about it, and I'm going to be sharing a little bit about my particular exploration with going to Egypt and knowing that there was some karma that I needed to clear in Egypt, and like what I experienced when I traveled there. I think there's a lot of veils of illusion when it relates to Egypt. Like we kind of romanticize this time because we look at the pyramids and we look at all of the glamour and all the grandeur of the tombs, and there's been this whole field of Egyptology that has sprung about, and we've seen this a lot in Hollywood movies. And so I kind of want to touch on that, but specifically around like some of the misconceptions of Egypt that I've learned about in my own path to healing certain timelines as it relates to Egypt. So just like a little bit about me is I've been connected to Egypt for as long as I can remember. Egypt was always a place that I always wanted to go to. Always like kind of thought it was unattainable though. It always just seemed like in the distance. And when I actually was ready to go to Egypt, I'm really glad. I mean, I'm 38 now, and I went when I was 37. Okay, I had my experience in Egypt when I was 37. And I'm really glad that I waited to go until that particular time, because it was something I had been wanting to do for a really, really long time. And I realized like after I went that if I had gone earlier in my life, that I probably would have been perpetuating some of the same karmic timelines related to Egypt. Okay, so I had to do a lot of clearing and a lot of healing before I was even energetically prepared to be able to step on Egyptian soil. Okay, so that's the first thing. You know, if this is something that you are interested in, this is a place that you're interested in going to, but it's always kind of felt unattainable, there might be like a karmic knot that you might need to unravel, or something that needs to be revealed to you before. You know, there's certain places where the frequency is such a way, or you might have so much past life stuff that if you go there too early without kind of having your grounding in place, like a lot of weird stuff can happen to you. Okay, I've had those experiences as well in my travels. So just, you know, if Egypt is a place that you definitely want to go to, just start setting the intention to like clear karma with the land or clear karma in your ancestry so that you're a vibrational match to go to that land. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, I don't know if y'all have heard about that Pharaoh Akhenaten. Okay, Pharaoh Akhenaten was known as the heretic king. He was the king in the 18th dynasty, and he was known to be the first person in Egypt to bring about a concept of monotheism. Now, Pharaoh Akhenaten is somebody who people attribute Christianity to. All of the major one God religions are attributed to Pharaoh Akhenaten. And at the time though, when he brought this ideology to ancient Egypt, he was considered like, it was kind of like burn him at the stake kind of energy. Like people were like, you're trying to completely shift our culture. Because at the time, as we know, like ancient Egypt has several different gods. There's different gods for everything. But in the 18th dynasty, Pharaoh Akhenaten wanted to bring something else. He called it Atenism. He wanted people to worship the sun, not just the sun, because there were sun gods in Egypt. He wanted people to worship the sun disk, the Aten, okay? It's like a little flying sun disk. And, you know, I've always been really intrigued and fascinated with Pharaoh Akhenaten. I remember watching documentaries about him, and even though the documentaries didn't really paint him in a really great light, you know, he was very totalitarian in a lot of ways, kind of like a weird cult leader in a lot of ways. But there was something so magnetic and attractive to that story for me. And I've met a lot of people who've identified as light workers and starseeds who have had similar experiences with being attracted to the story of Pharaoh Akhenaten. And there's a reason for it. It doesn't mean that he's a good guy, okay? I'd actually like to talk about the other side of Pharaoh Akhenaten. A lot of times in the New Age community, he's uplifted and put on a pedestal because what they say is that he uplifts this thing called the law of one, or unity consciousness. That's what he was trying to do. But I actually have found the opposite, that his whole reign was about taking the goddess power away from the people and putting it into a large institution or priesthood, okay? And we can see this a lot of times in a lot of different monotheistic religions as it relates to taking the power away from, like, seeing God or goddess in form in yourself and then praying to an external deity and putting all of your energy in an external deity. So that was one thing, that was a huge karmic storyline that I needed to unravel as it related to healing karma with Egypt, was karma specifically with Akhenaten. Now, a lot of people also are very interested in Nefertiti. Nefertiti was Akhenaten's wife, okay? And they were kind of pictured as being the celebrity it couple at the time. Nefertiti was painted as being like the most beautiful woman ever. But, you know, if you look into a lot of the texts, the ancient texts that documents their relationship, you know, Pharaoh Akhenaten barely mentioned Nefertiti, barely referred to her in different political documents and that sort of thing. It was almost like she was an afterthought or not really there. And it actually leads to this concept of maybe they had a really strained relationship. Maybe their relationship wasn't as ideal as celebrity culture would have you think it was. And, you know, the pressure got really hot for the 18th dynasty and for Akhenaten's reign, to the point where everything collapsed and there was like an all and out, I guess you might call it, I don't know if it's civil war or rebellion against his regime. And Nefertiti is reported to have fled and actually gone more into East Africa, and there might be some lineage connections as it relates to that. Now, I'm going to get into a weird topic. I don't know, this might sound really weird to folks. I go into this a lot on my Patreon. We talk a lot about, not just talk, we do a lot as it relates to energetic hygiene and retrieving our power from different systems different belief systems, and also just different cords of attachment that may have kept us out of alignment with our sovereignty, okay? And I'm going to tell y'all something. The reason why I was so attracted to the Akhenaten Nefertiti story, I mean, I was obsessed with it. I learned everything I could learn about it. One of the reasons why I was so attracted to it is because I had something called ownership signatures to remove from that pharaoh lineage. Now, what is an ownership signature? An ownership signature shows up in the etheric realm as basically being a brand of ownership, saying that you are the property of so-and-so, okay? And ownership signatures can show up or manifest in a lot of ways. Sometimes you can be, you have to think about different vows, oaths, and agreements that maybe your family or your bloodline made. A lot of these folks dealt in some really deep magic, okay? When we think about Egypt, there's a huge magic and mystery to Egypt. And they didn't just plan for the next 30 years of your life. They were all about the afterlife. They were all about the eternal. So a lot of the vows and the oaths and agreements that you may have made, like if you were in a priesthood or if your family was in a priesthood, it was for life and it was for unending life. It's not just when you leave your vessel, it was a soul thing too. So that being said, the pharaohs, one thing to know about the pharaohs, like let's think about the stories that they've shared around how the pyramids were built. The pyramids were built through a lot of slavery. And that's another thing about Akhenaten's reign, is that he did this whole thing where he was like, no, we're doing the one God. We're all worshiping the Aten, right? And so what he did is he destroyed, he made it so that like lots of different statues were destroyed. Lots of different deities were destroyed. Buildings were destroyed. And he wanted to build up his own kind of kingdom. They call it Armana. There's a place called Armana. I wasn't able to make it there when I was in Egypt. It didn't line up. It's really far out of the way, but it was a huge place. And, you know, the people weren't really interested in this one God or this Aten sort of thing. He had to really create a cult following to get this to happen. Okay. He created a cult to get his stuff done. And he also forced people to build stuff for them. Okay. Through a lot of slavery, okay, through a lot of coercion. And a lot of pharaohs did this, quite honestly, okay? And it was kind of like the people were their property. The people did what they wanted to do and what they wanted them to do. And let's think about the pyramids, okay? And I've talked about pyramids and this concept of etheric pyramids if you go way back on my channel, either on TikTok or on In the Goddess Keys. When I was doing that, I was literally in Egypt. So I was channeling this information while in Egypt. Yeah, so a lot of stuff just came to me during this time. But anyways, etheric pyramids, let's think about an actual pyramid, right? So you got a lot of people at the bottom and like one or two people like at the top, right? So the way that that one person or elite few people at the top thrive is through the work and the labor of the masses, okay? So just like the physical pyramids happen, right? The same thing happens etherically. Okay, so the pharaohs, they dealt in magic. They dealt in spirituality. This wasn't, the flesh suit was just a little small portion of life to them. Okay, they knew all about the auric field and the etheric, all that kind of stuff. Okay, they were skilled in that. If you wanted to be a priest or a priestess in Egypt, that was a lifelong commitment. You know how like if you, in Western society, if you want to master something, you get a PhD. That's just a few years, right? You know, if you put your nose to the grindstone, you can have your PhD by like 26, 27. No, like if you wanted to be a priest or a priestess in ancient Egypt, like that's like 40-year commitment tops. Okay. Now, a lot of the information and knowledge of those systems, they started to get watered down and fade away when there was this merging of Western society with Greeks and the Greek society. And a lot of that was through the reign of Akhenaten and this one God monotheistic sort of reign that he had going on. And then you had different like Greek philosophers coming in and like they were kind of in the Egyptian mystery schools, but like maybe instead of doing the 40 years, they would do it for like 10, 15 years, but then they would now be experts on it. And then they utilize that to start their Greek religions and all that kind of stuff. You know, they want you to believe that basically it was just like, okay, the Europeans took over Egypt, took their knowledge and then built their own civilizations. But that's actually not true. There was actually a concerted effort. You know, the Greeks, there were certain Greeks who worked with certain elite priesthoods in Egypt to create a power shift. Okay, they wanted to completely shift the culture of old Egypt and bring it into more of like the new Egypt. That's where you get that whole Alexander the Great or Alexander the Greek. That was kind of his reign. And there was a lot that was done to create deities. I'll talk about that more. I'm not going to get into it as much now, but let's just say that deities that we take for granted as just being people or beings who have existed, maybe they didn't exist. Maybe they were fabricated by certain elite priesthoods in order to energy harvest from the masses. And I'll let y'all fill in the dots around who I might be talking about. And I'll go into that in more depth in another live. Okay. But let's go back to ownership signatures. Okay. Ownership signatures. So remember, these pharaohs, they weren't just about getting people to utilize their bodies to uplift them. They were about the soul. They were about the eternal. They were about the afterlife. So they had certain stuff going on etherically and energetically, and they had different ownership signatures. There are different ways, different rituals, different stuff you can get into to really not just have somebody in this life, but their bloodline. Okay. So what I had realized when I was clearing karma specifically with Akhenaten's dynasty, because I realized I had a lot of energies around that, I had to literally clear ownership signatures from pharaonic lineages, okay? Where literally, and how does this manifest? It's like, okay, yeah, but that was in a past life. What does that have to do with now? What, we're in 2025? At the time, this was 2024. Why does that even matter in my life? I'm just kind of like, am I just stuck in an etheric realm? No, y'all. Okay, this stuff goes deep. So if I have an ownership signature on me as it relates to a pharaonic bloodline, that means the descendants of that pharaonic bloodline have ownership signatures on me. It's a blood thing. Okay. So that means, how does this play out? You might have pharaoh karma if you find yourself being exploited, like in power positions, a lot of times bosses. Okay, if you have a very exploitative boss, right? And it just feels like, dang, why does it feel like they own me? Like, why does it feel like they just feel like they can just call me whenever, they can just ask me to do whatever? And why do I feel like I owe them something? Okay, ownership signatures, and a lot of times it's pharaoh karma. Okay, let's go back to the etheric. So just like I talked about the physical pyramids, there are etheric pyramids, okay? There's going to be certain people on the top of those etheric pyramids and certain people on the bottom of those etheric pyramids. Interestingly enough, there are 18 etheric pyramids. If y'all want to learn more about that, go on a website called Aligning with Earth. I have, if you go on my YouTube at the Goddess Keys, you'll find a subliminal around like clearing etheric pyramids. If you want to go deeper with it, it is a very intensive process. I will say that. The stuff you see in the etheric realms around where you're placed on these pyramids is quite wild. Okay. But if you're interested in going down that route, I have that in two places. So I have that in my Heal Your Money Story toolkit that I've released recently, where we go into etheric pyramids, because there is a money pyramid. There's, 18 pyramids, a whole bunch. I'm not going to go into them right now. But then that's also like on my Patreon too, if you want to do that healing etheric pyramids meditation. Okay. But anyway, you're positioned in different places in these pyramids. Okay. So, and a lot of times it's a bloodline thing. So people who are of a pharaonic bloodline, even if they don't know it, right, but their family just happens to just always get the lucky breaks, right? They just happen to always have the wealth. They just happen to always have the access to resources. Okay, right on time. Good. I'm glad, RK, that this is right on time. Yeah, I'm feeling it. I don't know. This was not on my mind to do today, y'all. This just kind of happened and I'm just doing it. Okay. So Egypt's on my mind for some reason. And I'm not there, but like I learned so much during that time, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to download this information. Like I'll do it later. But now I'm just like, you know what? Let's go. Let's do it now. So anyway, that's why it mattered, because I was in weird, okay, let me give y'all a story. Okay, so I'm going to tie in I had a lot of weird karmic storylines as soon as I hit Egyptian soil. Okay. One thing was like, I kept getting propositioned for business deals, like to go into business. Like literally I got to Luxor. Like I was guided to go to Luxor. And literally the host of the place I was staying at, like it was a brother. Okay, so they had that energy of they owned a lot of different property around Luxor. One brother propositioned me he had this like retreat center he was building right next to a really old temple. And he was like, yeah, I go and meditate there. Let me show it to you. Let's do a retreat. But I could tell the way he approach spirituality was of a very like it just wasn't in alignment. Okay. But he was like immediately like, okay, let's go and create a retreat together. Let's go meditate in this temple, like out the gate. I was like, this is weird. Like, this don't even make sense. Okay. So that was one. Then the other brother, he wanted me to go into business with him to do like a tourism company. He wanted me to start bringing Americans in. It was like similar veins, and it was interesting because it's stuff that I'm kind of interested in. Like I've done retreats and I want to do retreats again, but like I'm very, because I have trauma with like being in cults and like being in a work cult and having to like deprogram my subconscious mind from being in all that sort of stuff. I'm very and a lot of stuff was done, a lot of programming was done in retreats as it related to that, because I was dealing with Pharaoh karma that I had no idea I was dealing with. Okay. So anyways, it was stuff like the propositions I was getting was like rationally it made sense. It's like, yeah. And then another brother was like, yeah, we can go into a business together, and we could do tourism together, and I'll give you this profit. But it was like immediately, as soon as they saw me, they saw like, I'm gonna make money off of her. Like, it was that whole idea of like, I'll have the like large resources and I'll give you a cut. It was that energy. And they came from a family of a lot of wealth. And I just felt, I was like, I'm dealing with Pharaoh karma right now. I just like literally landed in Luxor. Then another experience happened. I'm gonna post this on Patreon a little later. There's this video where I'm working on clearing some ancestral karma at Luxor. And basically, there was a temple of Amun. Amun is a sun god. Okay, so there's a lot of karma related to sun gods in ancient Egypt. And Amun, and the Amun priesthood in particular, is a priesthood that was really kind of about that, just really about keeping the power out of the hands of the people and into an elite few. Okay, so I literally was going to this particular temple specifically to clear karma with Amun, to release all ownership signatures related to anything related to the Amun priesthood. Tell me why. I'm like, and I'm over here, I'm like trying to like make my peace. Some like priest guy who's literally an Amun priest, he comes up to me, he starts accosting me. He's like, come with me into this temple, like pray to Amun, pray to Amun. I'm like, I don't want to pray to Amun. I'm cool. Like, I'm just here to take pictures. But like, he kept chasing me down to say, go pray to Amun. And I'm like, so anyways, I did a little bit of recording with that, because I'm like, this don't even make sense. Okay, you might have a feeling that you have karma related to Egypt, but how do you know for sure? I'm gonna give you a surefire way to learn. You should really start getting into asteroids, learning. So I know we know about astrology, we know about where our sun sign is, our rising sign, all that stuff, but there are thousands of asteroids out there, and they're all named after certain things. A lot of asteroids are named after different deities. They're named after different places, a lot of mythical, quote unquote, mythical deities. And there is it creates the algorithm of the false matrix simulation. Okay, when you start looking at asteroids and where they're placed in your chart, you will get a reservoir of information as it relates to what your past lives were, what your gifts are, what are some of the ways that the false matrix is going to attack you the most. If you want the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, the how, start studying asteroids. Okay, start studying asteroids. I did a whole download, like a 2-hour lecture on that on Patreon, if you're interested in like how to do that, how to program asteroids into your chart, how to read them, like all that sort of stuff. So there are a list of Egyptian asteroids that you can even look at that are Egyptian themed. Okay. And when I did that and I plugged that into my birth chart, it was very clear I had I already knew I had a past life in Egypt, but it just confirmed it because of where the Egyptian themed asteroids were placed within my birth chart. Okay, so that's one way that you can start seeing, like, are there any unresolved issues, any unresolved baggage that I need to take care of as it relates to ancient Egypt. Okay, so anyway. And, Amun, that was one where it was very karmic. Giza was another one where it was very karmic. So anyway, and there was even a story, I shared this in another live, where basically I specifically didn't want to go to the Giza pyramids, and I won't go into that now, but I wasn't interested in going. And literally, I'm going to a whole other set of pyramids, and the Uber driver's just like, I can't get to those pyramids, but I'm gonna take you to Giza. And I'm like, I don't want to go to, like, I just was like stuck. But literally, and that's never happened before. Like, how often does a Uber driver just take you somewhere randomly? That doesn't normally happen in Uber. But anyway, it was just like a magnetic force that took me to Giza. I was like, this is some BS. Like, but you know, when I looked at my where that Giza asteroid was placed in my birth chart, it made all the sense of the world. Okay, so all that to say, when I was in Egypt, there was a lot that I had to do around clearing soul contracts, clearing ownership signatures, and that's just part one. Because there's also another story as it relates to Egypt, which I didn't really get into, and I'm just going to touch on it here, and I'll be sharing other content about this later. Egypt wasn't just in Africa. There was an Egypt before the one in North Africa. There was an Egypt in the Americas as well, okay? And that was something, you know, I had heard about it, but it didn't really, my subconscious mind didn't want to believe it. There was a block there where I didn't really want to believe it. It just didn't make sense. I spent so much time studying Egypt in North Africa. This idea of there being an Egypt in the Americas just felt off to me, or like, I don't know. I just didn't want to like accept it. It was like a cognitive dissonance kind of thing. But it wasn't until I got to the land in Egypt of North America that I was shown, and this was done through my ancestors and my higher self and all that sort of stuff. And I was shown, oh, okay, there was actually a whole Egypt going on in the Americas. And let's go back to that Akhenaten story real quick. Okay, Akhenaten, 18th dynasty, he was known as the heretic king. He brought in a whole different belief system in ancient Egypt. A lot of people didn't like it, and they worked hard to oust him. There is a theory out there that says that Akhenaten and the 18th dynasty, that actually happened in the Americas, y'all. That happened in the Americas, and then there was a rift that happened with the people of Egypt in the Americas, and they were expelled. There was a group of people who were expelled from the Americas, and then they created a new Egypt in North Africa. Okay, and this goes back to the whole Akhenaten 18th dynasty. This also can go into that Moses story as well, and this idea of like the wandering tribes as well. There's a lot of karma as it relates to North Africa and the Americas that needs to, first of all, be learned about and then be healed. Okay, so another thing I want to share, I'm going to be ending this live soon. I'll be sharing more content around this. Stay tuned and keep up with me on YouTube at The Goddess Keys, because I'll be doing a subliminal around healing karma as it relates to Egypt. And I'll be going a little bit more in that for folks who are looking for different healing practices. But that was one thing I was shown, was that the reason why the Akhenaten story stuck with me so heavily was because it's connected to a rift, like an expelling that happened in the Americas. And so we know that there's tons of pyramids in the Americas, right? But they always try to hide them for some reason. Okay, there was a huge vendetta that happened when a group of people were expelled. They had to set up shop somewhere else. There are not as many pyramids in Egypt, okay? You'll find more pyramids in Sudan, more pyramids in the Americas, but not so many in Egypt. And yet, that's where we're told most of the pyramids are, just in our history and our textbooks, okay? So all this to say, if you are attracted to the story of Akhenaten, don't just look in North Africa. Also make sure you're looking in the Americas, okay? Because that's where it starts. And there's a lot of history. There's still a lot of pyramids that really haven't been fully excavated. There's a lot of pyramids in the Americas where there's huge civilizations that you literally can't get to. You would literally have to like walk for 3 days to even enter them. And there's a reason for that. Like, they could easily create the roads and that sort of stuff, but they don't really want to do that. There's even murmurings of pyramids in California, Grand Canyon, et cetera, et cetera. And this is connected to Akhenaten's story, okay, and to the creation of monotheistic religions and a regime change in terms of like how we perceive spirituality and religion. I just really want for anybody who's thinking about Egypt, make sure that you're not just looking at Africa, okay? Stay in the Americas too and do the cross intersection as well, okay? So that's really, really pivotal that we do at this time. And then let's think about it, y'all. Why do we got pyramids on our dollar bills? If you look closely at the dollar bill, that pyramid is not actually from Egypt. It's from Nubia. Nubia's in Sudan. If you look at the geometry of that pyramid, it's more of a Nubian pyramid. Like the Nubian pyramids were more like this. Like they were like they were not as wide. They were like skinnier. Okay. If you look closely at the dollar bill and look at the geometry of it, it's actually connected to Nubia, which gets into a whole matriarchal sort of thing, which, like I said, to be continued.